A very special guest today. I met Billy back in September, October-ish, and we've been going out to Baja Fish Tacos, the place where good things happen. Oh, look at Rick's sad. Hey, I'll take you this week, Rick. Your treat. Okay. Hey, no, Billy and I have been meeting over the last 3 months, and our elders have met with them, and he's taught our youth. Youth, are you in here that was here when Billy was here? Yes? Okay, awesome. Yeah, and so this guy's awesome, and his wife is way better than him, too. So this is Joni, everybody. Joni, give us a wave. There she is. There she is. Joni's awesome. And so Billy said he'd share the word with us today, and I've seen his message. It is an awesome message. You guys are in for a real treat. Can we give the biggest encounter welcome ever to Billy Archie, ladies and gentlemen? Let's hear it for him.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, man. Well, good morning, Encounters. So good to be here, to see your faces, and to share God's word. More than a few years ago, when I was in my first youth internship, I was taking students to this beautiful mountain lake. We were going to go, it was in the summer, and we wanted to go out on this lake, and we had just a bunch of the students, junior high and high schoolers, and we thought, you know what would be a great idea is to rent a pontoon boat and go out on this lake. And I don't know if you don't know what a pontoon boat is. It's basically just a big flat boat that moves very, very slow, and everyone just hangs out on it. And we thought this will be a good time. So we just rented this boat, we pile everybody in, we got their lunches, their lunch bags, their coolers, all this type of stuff, and we're motoring along, going across this lake. And I mean, when I talk about like a beautiful mountain lake, I want you guys to think about, like envision. I mean, it is just pristine. There's giant cedars and pines all around on the shore. There's huge granite mountains in the background. We're just cruising along. There's birds flying in the sky. There's fish jumping in the water. I mean, it wasn't that bad, but I mean, it was amazing. And we got all these students on. We're having a good time. We're going to go all the way across the other side of the lake, and where the places that you jump off the rocks are. And we're on our way there. And I'm just sitting here, and I'm enjoying this as I'm captaining this boat, this pontoon boat. And I'm sitting back, and I'm thinking, man, this is the life. This is amazing. Are you kidding me? It's so relaxing. It's so nice. There's just nothing to worry about. Why do I feel water on my feet? What's going? Oh no. As we're going along, as I'm not paying attention, the pontoon boat is starting to sink. It's starting to go into the water. Students are screaming. They're grabbing lunches. Like, guys are like, every man for themselves, like pushing girls in the water and bailing off, like with the ladies' lunches. I mean, it was insane. And eventually we found out what happened is I kicked this thing in reverse. I started yelling, everybody in the back of the boat, all this type of stuff. What had happened is we had gotten a few too many students on there. I mean, it was my first internship. Mistakes happen. We had a few too many students on there, and everyone wanted to be in the front of the boat, with the legs in the water, just sort of feeling watching the fish and there was no dolphins. And it just caused, right? You're just sort of going along, physics, all that type of stuff. You had a captain who didn't really know what he was doing. I can't believe they rented it to me. I don't even know who, it was their fault. But anyway, we didn't sink the boat. I'm not in debt, $50,000 for that. So, still paying it off. Everything, we pulled it out just fine. Continued on, we balanced the weight, all this type of stuff. Today, we're going to look at another time a boat almost sank. But not due to having too many people, and not due to the ineptness of a captain piloting it, but it's because of a fierce storm, and because God wanted to reveal something about himself. So if you have your Bibles, it'll also be up on the screen. We're going to look at Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke, and he rebuked the wind and said to the seas, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Man, I love this passage. I love this passage because it's so full of these little details, right? Like, it's talking about the time of day. It's talking about that there's other boats with him. Jesus is asleep on a cushion, like these little tiny details that point to this being the eyewitness account of somebody who was literally in the boat at the time. That's so amazing. So let's start looking at these verses. You know what? I'm gonna stop pretending I can see. Oh, look, verse 30. Oh no, okay. So it says, verse 35. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." Who said to go across the other side? Jesus. Yes, excellent. Yeah, good. There's some interaction here. That's okay. But yes, Jesus said to go across the other side. I love this because who is Jesus? According to scriptures, Jesus He's the Son of God. He is God. He is all-knowing, all-powerful. And so Jesus, in this moment, said, let's go across to the other side. Jesus knew this storm was coming. Jesus had knowledge this storm was coming, and he chose that moment to go across to the other side of the lake. Now, Jesus, being all-powerful God, knowing what was coming, could have said, hey guys, let's go across the other side of the lake. But you know what? Let's go down here and have some fish tacos really quick. We'll wait like an hour, we'll let it set, and storm could blow through, and then they could go across. Or Jesus could have said, hey guys, you know what? Let's not go across, let's just go down on this side of the lake for a little while. And then maybe we'll cross after a little while. But he didn't. He didn't. I don't know about you guys, but have you ever felt that God's timing is just off? I'll take that as a no by your response. No one has ever. I'm the only one. I'm the only one. So Joni, my wife, and I, we are adopting a baby boy. He is going to be 6 months old this month on the 26th. Yeah. There you go. That's a proper response. We're super excited about this. Crazy story. This is a crazy God's story of how this happened. We didn't discover that we were going to adopt this baby boy until just a few weeks before he was born. We had no idea. So 7 months ago, we were I think 7.5 months ago, we were in Iceland. We were like, this is the life. No kids, we got money to spend, whatever. Let's go to Iceland. We come back and we find out from our hairdresser, hey, there's this baby that needs a home. And we're like, well, let's pray about it and we'll see. So we prayed about it and talked about it for about, a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden it was like, God was like, this is what you're supposed to do. I want you to adopt this child. And we're like, okay, God, we're in. At almost the exact same time that we said, okay, God, we're in, our landlord of 11 years decided to say, hey, we're going to sell the house that you guys have been living in. And I said to God, are you sure? Are you positive that this is the right timing, that we're supposed to adopt this baby boy without, what is going on? Okay, all right. I definitely question God's timing as we headed into this storm. I thought, God, there's a lot of different ways that we could avoid this. Maybe we don't adopt William. Maybe we try to find another place to live, or can our landlord please just hold on? Why do you need to sell the house? We're great tenants. We're amazing. Come on. Sometimes I question God's timing, especially as we head into the storm. But this passage reminds us, and this is this first fill-in here, is that Jesus doesn't want us to dodge the storm. Jesus doesn't want us to dodge the storm. It is Jesus who led his disciples into this storm. And you guys, it wasn't just any storm. We've had a Southern California storm this last day and a half. Batten down the hatches. People are like, I'm not going anywhere. This is madness. Storm Watch 2024. It's the end of the world. Noah, get the boat. I mean, but check this out. Verse 37. Verse 37 says, and a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat so that the boat was already filling. I love how subtle sometimes the English language is. A great windstorm arose. It's very subtle. The Greek here is interesting because the Greek for this description of this great windstorm is more like a whirlwind, like a violent attack of wind. Have you been violently attacked by wind? Some people are like, yes, I have. I was walking in the door, a breeze came by, violently attacked. No, I mean, this is crazy. In Matthew 8's account, the language there says it was a great shaking or a sea quake. We've been through earthquakes. I don't think I've ever been to a sea quake before. But this is what this is describing. Now, these were seasoned fishermen, right? The disciples, they weren't they weren't a 20-something guy barely paying attention, driving a boat full of students across a mountain lake that had never driven before. No. These guys had been, they knew this lake. They probably knew this boat and how it worked, how it operated. They'd probably been through crazy storms before. But this storm was so intense that they panicked. It caused them to freak out. I grew up near Yosemite National Park. I was born and raised up in that area. I grew up there until Joni and I moved down here about 16, 17 years ago. It's a beautiful, beautiful area. But if you know anything about Yosemite National Park, you know the area that there's a lot of trees, there's a lot of grass, there's a lot of fires. And I grew up with the threat of fires almost every year. Like it was just a sort of common thing. It was like, well, there's a fire started somewhere. Okay, no big deal. I remember this one year when I was younger. It was a little bit more intense. I remember walking around and it was gray, like this was in summer, but it was gray like it was going to rain all the time. I remember having to wear a mask because there was so much smoke in the air. I remember that there was ash that was falling like it was snowing. And even through all this, I was like, it's a fire. Until the night that we came home and my dad said, you guys, we need to pack up the pictures. All of a sudden I knew this was not just an ordinary fire. This was something that I had never seen before. And it was one of the most destructive fires that had ever come through the Yosemite area where I live. I mean, this storm that the disciples were now in was so crazy. Now, we could read the rest of these verses and we think about, okay, so when the storms of life come, I should just call out to Jesus and he'll rescue me from the storm, right? He'll just make it go away, right? Not exactly. Not exactly. Does Jesus want us to turn to him in the storms? Yes, yeah. But not to be our escape route. What he wants us to do is to learn to trust him in the middle of the storm. Now, you also might be thinking, hey, okay, if we're not supposed to dodge the storm, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to just stay in the storm? And often the answer is yes. But that can be really scary. Yes. Yes, it can. And let's look at how the disciples reacted in this very scary time. Verse 38 says, but he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion, and they woke him and said to him, teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Here the disciples, they go up to Jesus, they shake him awake, and they accuse him of not caring. They accuse Jesus of not caring. Jesus, the one who just before had touched the leper that no one would touch, the one who just before healed a paralyzed man that was brought by his friends and dropped down in his midst through a roof. Jesus, the one who taught them to love their enemies. The one who brought a dead son back to life because he was moved. Jesus, you don't care? You don't care that we're perishing? In fear, they question God. Again, I don't know about you, but I see myself here. I see myself in these moments, in these storms, and I say to God, God, do you even care? Do I mean so little to you? My life is a mess right now. Things are falling down all over the place. How am I gonna pay for this? How am I gonna do that? Maybe you see yourself a bit too. Maybe you're struggling with some sickness. Maybe you're struggling in loneliness. Maybe there's some things going on at work. Maybe there's some issues with your spouse or your kids, someone else in your family. And in the fear of these storms, we start to question God's love for us. But this brings us to our next point. Jesus doesn't want us to fear the storm. Jesus doesn't want us to fear the storm. Now, it's natural to be afraid. It's natural. When things feel out of control, when we don't know what's coming, it's natural to feel this fear, but we don't need to fear the storm. And this stems from the understanding of who Jesus is. Again, I gave you like a little hint earlier, but who is Jesus according to the Bible? He's God. Jesus is God. And Jesus may allow us to experience hardships and experience struggle. But it doesn't mean that we need to be afraid. Tim Keller says it like this. Christianity teaches that contra secularism, suffering is meaningful. There is a purpose to it. And if faced rightly, it can drive us like a nail deep into the love of God and into more stability and spiritual power than you can imagine. Why is that? Why is that? It's because Jesus promises to be with us. He promises to be with us in the storm. He promises to be with us through the storm. He promises to be within us. But sometimes we struggle to see that. Not only do Joni and I have an amazingly adorable son, who you'll probably see. I think he's next door. I can't wait for you guys to meet him. He is, I may be biased, but he is adorable. I mean, and it's not even that, right? He doesn't even look, it's not like he's like Joni and I. So it's not that, he's just plain old adorable. It's not even like I'm complimenting myself because he looks like me. But no, he's a cute. He's a cute kid. But not only do we have an adorable son, we have an adorable puppy. Well, he's not necessarily a puppy anymore. He's like 11 years old. But he's tiny. He's tiny. He's this little guy. His name is Snickers. Now, Snickers, we didn't name him. He came with the name. It's short for Snickerdoodle. Why, yes, Joni loves cookies. We didn't name the dog after that love. No. But his name is Snickers. But Snickers gets really scared at storms. I mean, he freaks out when there is like lightning and thunder. He starts to shake, and he starts shaking very violently, right? And he starts to dig. He's trying to dig and just burrow under anything, and he starts panicking. He can't even catch his breath. And if you feel his heart, it is racing like a million miles an hour. It's like he's gonna have a heart attack. Right? This little guy is just freaking out. And what I try to do is I try to comfort him, right? I try to wrap him up. I try to communicate with him that he is okay, that ultimately he is safe. So I hold him, right? I speak gently to him. I say, Snickers, it's gonna be okay. I stay with him, I keep him near me. But Snickers can't grasp the fact that I will protect him. I mean, he's anxious. He's worried. He's in the middle of this storm. And I think that we are like Snickers sometimes in the middle of these storms. I mean, the truth is that God is holding us, right? He's staying with us. He speaks to us in his word. He reminds us that he has a plan. And sometimes it's hard for us to see and understand this plan, and we may never fully understand what it is, but it doesn't mean that this storm and this suffering is worthless. The storm doesn't scare Jesus. It doesn't surprise him. I mean, he's sleeping in the back on a cushion. Detail, so good. Right, he's asleep on the back on a cushion. Water is literally coming over the sides of the boat. I mean, when I felt water just slowly trickling up on the pontoon boat, I freaked out. I mean, this is crashing. It's talking about the boat is almost sinking. And Jesus is, I don't know if he snored. I imagine he did. Probably because I snore, and I'm like, of course he snores. But a curious thing happens in this moment, and it reveals the heart of God. Verse 39, and he woke, and he rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. The surprising thing, I don't know if you catch it, is that Jesus rebukes the wind and quiets the waves instead of his accusers. The disciples are accusing him of not caring. They're accusing him of saying, "You don't love us." Instead, he shows grace and mercy to them, and he turns to nature. And like an unruly child, I love the Greek here again, he says basically, "Sit down and shut up." The Greek here connects it to the idea of muzzling something, right? Just putting your hand on the mouth and just saying, "Shut it." There is a sharpness in this word. There is a command. It's not a plea. It's not like Jesus said, "Hey, can you please be quiet? Can you stop?" Jesus says, "Shut it." And it does. It does. The same Greek used for great storm is used here for a great calm. Megas. The idea that it's painting is that it got completely calm. It got eerily calm. They were just in a sea quake. They were just in basically a wind attacking them, waves crashing over, and all of a sudden, it stops. It's not that the storm just blew through. It stopped. Have you guys ever tried to stop like waves or ripples in water? You ever see, like, you go down the ocean and like students or like kids are standing there and they're like, and the waves like crash into them and it just sort of keeps going and the wave around, there's always water. What it's describing here is that everything went silent. Wow. Jesus commands peace, and the disciples see something unlike they have ever seen before. See, and Jesus wants us as well to find peace in him. It's not a peace if everything is going great in our lives. Jesus invites us to have a better peace. A can't be taken away no matter what kind of peace. Paul says it like this in Philippians 4:4-7. "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." When we trust that God is in control, when we trust that he loves us, when we trust that he is with us, even in the middle of the storms, this glorifies him. And it's good for us. This takes us to our next point. You see, Jesus does want us to look to him in the storm. Jesus does want us to look to him in the storms. And the disciples did, and look at their response. When they see him, verse 41, and they were filled with great fear and said to one another, who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Again, they recognize Jesus is something entirely different than they've ever seen. Who is this? Now, Jesus has done some cool things before, right? He's told parables. Well, you know what? A lot of people can tell parables. There's a lot of creative people. There's a lot of parables that came in before. He did some healings. He could have faked those. Like, honestly, right? There's faith healers. There's people that fake it. There's people that do it for real, but he could have been faking it. Drove out demons. Well, one, that could have been a fake. Two, other people have done it before. Three, maybe it's undiagnosed psychiatric issues. Right? So these three things that the disciples had seen before, you could explain it away. But how do you explain away when someone controls the weather? We are an advanced civilization, and we still can't make it rain in California during drought, or stop raining in Texas when the floods are coming. Jesus did. Jesus does. The disciples were adequately versed in the Old Testament. They knew that it was Yahweh who held back the rain until Elijah prayed. In Job, it says he gives rain on the earth and sends water on the fields. Psalm says you rule the raging of the sea. When its waves rise, you still them. Jeremiah says when he utters his voice, there is tumult of water in the heavens. In Jonah, it says the Lord hurled a great wind on the sea, and there was a great storm on the sea, so the ship was about to break up. If it wasn't clear to the disciples before this moment, it was now clear that Jesus was something else, and Jesus is God.
That's good. Wow.
And God is with them in the storm. This takes us to our final point. It's that God will use the storms of our lives for our good and his glory as we look to and trust him. I know it's a lot. But God will use the storms of our lives for our good and his glory as we look to and trust him. When I was in 6th grade, my sister was in 9th grade. One day she was running in PE, and she passed out. And we didn't know it at the time, but what had happened is that she had had a stroke. She had to be metaflighted an hour and a half away from where we live. And that moment, that storm, forever changed my family's life. Trying to juggle being at the hospital and running a small business, trying to juggle finances and school, trying to juggle a sister who is different than what she was just a week before, and learning how to speak and walk again, and all these things. My life changed dramatically in that storm, and over the next few days, weeks, and months, and even years. But in that storm, through that storm, my family learned to turn to Jesus even more. And in those moments, we grew. We grew and experienced the love of a church community. We saw God provide financially things that would appear out of nowhere. We learned to have compassion for those who were hurting. And ultimately, it moved me and my parents and my family closer to Jesus. The storms in our lives allow God's power to work in and through us. Guys, if the storm had never happened, the disciples may have never seen Jesus' power. And this moment points directly to their understanding that Jesus was Emmanuel, God with us. God can and will use the storms in our lives to lead us to encounter him more fully and minister to others more compassionately. This week, I've got a couple questions for you guys to consider and talk about, some challenges for this week. What are the storms in your life you're trying to dodge? And why? What storms in your life are you afraid of? And why? And finally, what are 2 things you can do today to remind you of God's presence with you in the midst of the storms in your life? And then how can this help others? I hope this week that you're encouraged as you're reminded that Jesus is with you, with me, in the midst of the storms that you're walking through right now.